Yeah, hi everyone, it's Mr. Markwick here. I thought I'd create another video today just to introduce you to some of the language that I'm going to be using in the upcoming topic. The topic, if you're in my class that we're looking at, is linear and simultaneous equations, so it's essentially algebra. And some of the words, terms that I'm going to be using might be unfamiliar, so I thought I'd just explain what they are so that you are familiar with those when I'm using those in the upcoming videos. So I'm just going to go ahead and get straight into it. The first word or term that I'm talking about is pronumeral or variable. And by that I'm just meaning a pronumeral or variable, they actually mean the same thing. I tend to use the word variable, but depending on what textbook you're looking at, a variable or a pronumeral is a letter that's used to represent an unknown value. So for example, the letter X is quite a common variable used in algebra. Y, A or B, or any letter of the alphabet could be a pronumeral that's used in algebra to represent an unknown value. Okay. Now I'm just going to skip straight down to the word term. A term is essentially made up of pronumerals and numbers, but involve multiplication and division only. So by that, what do I mean? I mean something like 2x could be a term. And what's actually happening between the 2 and the x is multiplication. So it's 2 times x. We leave out the multiplication sign. X over 4, or x divided by 4. That's a term. Okay. Something as simple as y from the first example. That's a term as well. Minus 3a is a term. Okay. Positive 2b is a term. Y squared is a term. Okay. So these are all terms, and terms are separated but include the addition and subtraction signs. Okay, and that's really important to remember. So when I start talking about an expression is made up of one or more terms. So an expression could be as simple as 2x. That's a one-term expression. But an expression could also be 2x plus 3y. All of a sudden there I have two terms. My first term is 2x, and my second term is positive 3y. If I write another expression, let's say x over 4 plus 2y plus 3z, take 5a. How many terms have I got now? That's right, I got 4. It's x over 4 is my first term, positive 2y is my second term, positive 3z is my third term, and minus 5a is my fourth term. So terms include but are separated by the addition and subtraction sign. So really important to remember that. And an expression is basically just one or more terms. Okay. Now the difference between an expression and an equation is that an expression doesn't contain an equal sign. So you can see the example I've got here, 2x plus 3y. There's no equal sign, but if I wrote 2x plus 3y and had an equal sign and then had an expression on the right hand side of that equation, so let's say equals 7x, all of a sudden this is an equation now because it contains an equal sign. The main difference between an expression and an equation is that equations contain equal signs, expressions do not. Simple as that. Okay. Moving on to the word coefficient. So a coefficient is the letter in front of the pronumeral. The number in front of the pronumeral. My apologies. So if I'm going back to my example I've used here, so let's say 2x plus 3y, the coefficient of x is 2. In this case it's positive 2. The coefficient of y is positive 3. If I extend that expression and say, let's say take 7z, now all of a sudden my coefficient of z is minus 7. Okay. If I had a term that was by itself, so for example y, what's the coefficient of y there? It's 1. Okay, algebraic we'd leave out a 1. So it's 1 times by y. But in algebra, we'll just leave off that 1. Okay, we'll just write it as y. Try and simplify it as much as possible. If the expression was minus b, what's the coefficient of b here? Okay, it's actually minus 1. Minus 1 times b is still minus b. Okay, so if there's no number in front of the variable, the coefficient is 1. If it's a minus sign in front of the variable, then the coefficient is just minus 1. Simple as that. The final word I'm going to introduce you to today is a constant term. A constant term is just a number with no variable. So if I was to write another expression, let's keep it similar, 2x plus 3y take 5. In this expression here, I've got 3 terms, we'd all agree, positive 2x, positive 3y, and minus 5. My constant term is my number. Number only, no variable. So in this instance, it's just minus 5 is my constant term. So if you're ever looking at an expression and you see a term that doesn't contain a variable, we call it a constant term. Okay? Alright, now I just want to go through quickly a few examples here to help you, I guess, get your head around that a little bit more. These are taken straight from the textbook, so again, if you're in my class, I won't get you to do these. We'll do this together right now. So, let's go ahead and look at question 1. It says, state the number of terms in these expressions. So if I'm looking at A, I've got 5x and positive 2y, and of course that means there's 2 terms there. In the second expression, I've got 1, which is a constant term. I've got 2a squared, and again, 2 terms. What's the coefficient of a squared in the second term? It's 2, isn't it? Right. Okay, in the question 1c, I have b squared. Again, the coefficient of b squared here is 1. I have positive ca, and I have minus 1, which is a constant term, but it's still a term. There are 1, 2, 3 terms in this expression. And for D, again, you may think there's 2 terms here, but there's not. Okay, remember we said that a term involves the operations of multiplication and division. So this fraction line here actually means to divide by. So that is just 1 term. Alright guys? Okay, moving on to question 3. It's asking about coefficient. So it says state the coefficient in these terms. So for question 3a, what is the coefficient of xy? Coefficient is 5. Okay, and to be more specific, it's positive 5. Coefficient for question 3b, minus 2a squared. What's the coefficient of a squared? Coefficient is minus 2. We are multiplying a squared by minus 2. What's the coefficient of x in question 3c? Well, remember, the coefficient is a number we're multiplying the variable by. I know we're dividing the variable by 3 here, but what are we actually multiplying the variable by in the first instance? Whoops. Up the top here. If there's no number in front of it, we assume we're multiplying by 1. So it's a positive 1. Okay? And in question 3D, what is the coefficient of the variable? Okay, which is a. Coefficient is minus 2 again. Alright? So hopefully that helps, guys. Like I said, for my class, I'm going to be going through some more content involving some examples around linear and simultaneous equations, and I'm going to be using these terms, so make sure you're familiar with them.